Hello readers by eyes and by ears, this is Mari Chan and welcome back to my channel. Today we are continuing with the reading of Remnants of Filth, Volume 4, which is also known as Yu by Rou Bao or Meat Bun, and we're covering chapters 115 through 118. I hope you all enjoy. Chapter 115, Back to 8 years ago. In the Jade Scroll's illusory realm, Morsi slowly opened his eyes. He found himself lying in an endless, shapeless darkness beneath the boundless expanse of night. A ribbon of jade blue light unfurled in the sky, its tightly packed seal-script characters flashing first bright, then dim. A deep and solemn voice boomed down from above, hoarse and cracked at the damaged scrolls.
"What? Dost thou wish to read?"
The history-recording jade scrolls had been successfully pieced back together. This was the invitation to revisit the past. Morsi pushed himself upright and spoke to that jade-colored light twisting across the night like the azure dragon with fangs and claws bared.
"I want to know whether Goo Mahng had some secret reason for defecting in this year."
That ribbon of light hung in the air, shimmering and coiling. Just as Morsi's hope slowly began to cool, just as he started to wonder if the jade scroll hadn't recorded the relevant events at all, the beam of light exploded into dazzling sparks. Innumerable flashing seal-script characters gathered in the shape of a massive illusory dragon. It had slender eyes and a long mouth, its whiskers and mane flying. The sky within the jade scroll roiled with a thunderous storm, gales stirring the clouds like waves. Claws and scales flashed as the dragon soared up toward the 9 heavens before suddenly diving down toward the minuscule figure that was Morsi. A sandstorm whirled to life, the bursting of jade-green light blinding as thunder crashed overhead. The last thing Morsi knew was the massive dragon falling like a deluge from the dome of heaven, its light piercing his soul like 1,000 arrows.
"The past is dead."
A faint sigh, like a final warning to those who came to read the scroll.
"Leave it to lie."
The interplay of light and color swept into his eyes like snowflakes, sinking into his pupils as if trying to inscribe all those accounts carved within the jade scrolls into his flesh and blood. The light went out. Morsi panted, his vision flashing with interweaving after images. He stood rooted to the spot and blinked laboriously, shaking his head back and forth and trying to recover his sight as quickly as possible. He couldn't tell which day from 8 years ago the history-recording jade scroll had brought him to. All he knew was that he had arrived somewhere very dim. He could hear rain pattering on the roof, drumming down and streaming over the tiles. In time, footsteps approached, stopping a short distance away. The rain tapped on the roof. There was no other sound. Just as Morsi was about to conclude he had hallucinated those footfalls, a familiar voice broke the silence.
"The Commoner Goo Mahng greets your Imperial Majesty."
This voice, soft as drifting snow, was like a crack of thunder that sent shockwaves through all the blood flowing in Morsi's veins. A disjointed, colorful blur of images still danced before Morsi's eyes. His eardrums were buzzing, but he endured his dizziness and turned around. The night wind blew in, bringing the scent of rain and the sweet fragrance of nightfall magnolia flowers. Smell, some said, was the sense engraved most deeply in one's memories, hardest to extinguish. Though he couldn't clearly see where he was, as soon as Morsi caught a whiff of this fragrance, he was immediately enlightened. The Golden Terrace. The history-recording jade scroll had brought him to the most secretive and difficult-to-reach palace hall in all of Chonghua. The Golden Terrace was built at the edge of the palace's back mountains, with eaves like wings and interlocking brackets, towering above 999 steps. The entire edifice was built of yellow rosewood, and the hall had been constructed like mortise and tenon joints without the use of nail or glue. A field of dragon's tongue magnolia from the imperial island on the East Sea flourished around it. The flowers and dark plums stripped with white in the shape of carp tails. They never wilted, and their fragrance was strong and unmistakable.
Dying with jeweled sword in hand to repay the trust of the king's command.
Footnote number 8. This is a line from Li He's poem, Song of Yanmen Governor, about how the emperor exchanged his favor for the devotion of his hand-picked soldiers atop the Golden Terrace. In every generation, only those subjects the emperor trusted and relied on most were permitted to ascend to its peak. From their youth, countless cultivators shouldered their parents' ardent hopes that in the future they would receive an imperial edict and climb these 9,099 steps secure in a glory few could hope to attain. From then on, they'd carry their great swords into battle and leave an undying legacy of meritorious deeds. Even Morsi himself was only invited to the Golden Terrace after he swore the vow of calamity and became one of these most trusted subjects. Never could he have expected that the first place the Jade Scroll brought him would be the Golden Terrace. Yet what was more astonishing was that the emperor had once summoned Goo Mahng here. He had no time for further thought before he heard the emperor say,
"General Goo, you've come at last."
The bright spots dancing across Morsi's vision were no longer as blinding as before. He closed his eyes and clenched his jaw. By the time he opened them again, he could finally see what lay in front of him. It was a stormy night, the exact hour impossible to discern. The gauzy hanging screens on all four sides of the terrace fluttered like smoke in the rain and wind. The emperor knelt, straight-backed, on a spread mat. Beside him were lacquer railings carved with motifs of dragons and clouds, and a half-drawn bamboo screen. Outside, the rain flooded down in torrents. Jade droplets splashed into the room, but the emperor paid them no mind. He turned from the distant, storm-shrouded mountains and looked through the hazy candlelight toward the entrance of the hall. Morsi's gaze followed his. Once again, he saw the Goo Mahng of 8 years ago whom he'd glimpsed in the time mirror. But the Goo Mahng in this history recording's Jade Scroll seemed somehow colder. As a clap of thunder broke the skies, a flash of lightning illuminated Goo Mahng's face, stark and sinister.
"General Goo, come in."
Goo Mahng pressed his lips into a tight line. He held a folded oil paper umbrella, dripping with rainwater. There were no servants on the Golden Terrace, so Goo Mahng leaned it against a pillar and strode slowly onto the terrace, bringing the cold night with him.
"Sit."
The emperor gestured at the low table.
"We've been waiting for you, and now you're finally here."
Goo Mahng took a seat on the opposite side. Besides coolness and apathy, there was a faint confusion in the set of Goo Mahng's brows. He didn't seem to understand why the emperor had summoned him here. He'd certainly never imagined the emperor would let him set foot in such a place. As expected, after a short silence, Goo Mahng said,
"I'm unsure for which urgent matter your Imperial Majesty has called me."
In lieu of an answer, the emperor toyed with the red clay pot on the table, waving a little black bamboo fan to help the tea fire burn more merrily. As the scalding steam rose into the damp, chilly wind, it was swallowed by the curtain of rain. Over the crash of the storm, the emperor spoke.
"General Goo, do you despise us?"
The only sound was the rain outside.
"We heard when Shizun took you out drinking, you told him you were very tired, that you couldn't bear it anymore. Does your Imperial Majesty have people tailing me?"
Goo Mahng's voice rang cold. The emperor continued fanning the flame under the pot and didn't deny it.
"Why does your Imperial Majesty make such an effort? You've stripped me of my rank, revoked my authority, detained my remaining soldiers."
After a pause, Goo Mahng continued.
"And sentenced my dearest brother to death. These days, I'm a mere commoner. Broken wings cannot fly. Your Imperial Majesty needn't waste this sort of effort on a member of the rabble. We're just asking, General Goo, do you despise us?"
Goo Mahng said nothing.
"In truth, you don't need to say it for us to know. You fought wholeheartedly for the nation for so long, in so many battles. But now you have nothing left aside from yourself. We took it all from you. Even when you begged us for gravestones for your brothers in front of the full court of civil and military officials, you received only mockery and derision."
The emperor laughed softly.
If you could, General Goo likely would have cracked our bones for soup long ago. Did your Imperial Majesty invite me here today just to chat?
Asked Goo Mahng. The tea came to a boil in the crackle-glazed ceramic pot, which pinged sharply from the steam. The Emperor lifted it by the hoop of its bamboo-wrapped handle and poured 2 cups of strong tea, one for himself and one for Goo Mahng. He pushed the teacup toward Goo Mahng with long fingers.
No, we asked to see you so that we may exonerate a certain person.
Like a frozen lake splitting, the icy mask Goo Mahng wore cracked to reveal human emotion. He looked up. Goo Mahng's lips trembled as he stared into the Emperor's eyes. After a long moment, one word stumbled from his mouth.
Who?
Outside the curtain screen, lightning flashed. Pale light washed the sky and the mountains, reflecting in the eyes of the two staring at each other over the candlelight. The Emperor said,
Just who you're thinking of, Loo John-Sheeng.
Thunder cleaved the skies with a boom. That earth-shaking crash seemed to pierce the heavens like a sharp sword, the lingering rumbles puncturing the pavilion's roof to stab right into Morsi's heart. Cold entered his bones like waves overflowing, rushing up his spine. Loo John-Sheeng had been falsely accused? And more importantly, the Emperor knew of it? Rain slanted in the fierce winds, extinguishing several candle lamps. The light on the golden terrace dimmed. But even like this, Morsi could see Goo Mahng's face, terrifyingly pale. It was obvious Morsi wasn't the only one shocked by this news. Goo Mahng was nailed to his seat, his eyes wide and blank. Only after a long while did he speak like a puppet receiving the breath of life. He paused with every syllable, his words halting.
What did you say? Loo John-Sheeng was falsely accused. Your brother was the victim of another's plot.
Goo Mahng looked as pale as a corpse. Wind buffeted the burning candelabras on the high terrace, and the flickering light of the candles danced across his colorless face. Rain drummed down around them. A moth had hidden beneath the eaves to escape the monstrous claws of the downpour, never knowing its grave awaited it on the terrace. It fluttered around the hungry flame, as if about to dart into its fatal light at any moment. Only after a long interval did Goo Mahng speak.
Is your Imperial Majesty joking? We knew you would react like this.
The Emperor pushed the teacup toward Goo Mahng's hand again.
Drink it. It'll get cold if you don't. This is Peach Blossom Spring's immortal tea left behind by Imperial Grandfather. There are only 5 small bricks of it in total. Imperial Grandfather opened one to present to the Grand Chancellor at his appointment ceremony as a show of respect. This second we offer to you today.
By now, Goo Mahng's shock had yielded to fury and terror. He was like an animal spun cruelly round and round, dizzied by the carrot and the stick. What this man before him planned to do, what schemes he had in store for him, whether what came next would be honey candy or a whipping, Goo Mahng knew none of it. He surged to his feet, chest heaving, and stared down at Chonghua's most respected, most powerful figure.
What does your Imperial Majesty mean by this?
Morsi could see Goo Mahng had to use a lifetime's worth of restraint to keep his voice below a shout. But Goo Mahng's hands were shaking, and his nails sank deep into his palms. The Emperor picked up the teacup, looking indifferently at Goo Mahng. The mournful wind caught his wide sleeves and sent him fluttering. Only then did Morsi realize the Emperor wore neither imperial robes nor crown. He was attired in a set of unremarkable clothes with a white jade hairpin securing his simply dressed black hair.
We mean to say that we're sorry, General Goo. We owe you an apology.
He ignored Goo Mahng's shocked and confused expression as he drank the strong tea in a single gulp, then showed Goo Mahng the empty cup. Goo Mahng took a step back, stammering, his lips opening and closing around indistinct words. Even if he couldn't hear them, Morsi knew what he was saying. Loo John-Sheeng was falsely accused. Loo John-Sheeng was falsely accused.
What was he falsely accused of? What was he falsely accused of?
Goo Mahng mumbled. His voice was hoarse, its pitch rising, yet his words still came slow as his mutters turned to hysterical shouts.
Was it that he didn't kill the envoy at Phoenix Cry Mountain? Is it that? Why didn't he tell me? Why didn't he speak out? Why are you telling me this now? Why are you the one to tell me this?
His pupils shrank to pinpricks as he stared, wild-eyed, into the Emperor's expressionless face. He had lost his mind to the point that he, a common-born criminal, dared speak like this to the son of the imperial family, to the point that Goo Mahng, who had always been cautious and prudent before nobles, would dare use the common "you" to address his emperor. As for the emperor, he slowly looked up. He had always been ruthless and paranoid, but he didn't berate Goo Mahng for his discourtesy.
No. At the Battle of Phoenix Cry Mountain, Loo John-Sheeng was indeed the one who executed the envoy. No one framed him. No one coerced him. However,
looking at Goo Mahng's shaking figure, the emperor paused. He produced a white chess piece streaked with scarlet blood and placed it gently on the table.
Someone possessed him, and he became their unwitting pawn.
The emperor drew back from the table as he murmured.
General Goo has dabbled in forbidden techniques. Take a look. Do you recognize this white chess piece?
Chapter 116. Loo John-Sheeng's Injustice. The blood-stained white chess piece sat on the pitch-black sandalwood of the tea table like the white of an eye spider-webbed with blood vessels, staring vacantly, eeringly in all directions. Goo Mahng squashed the emotions that threatened to overwhelm him and picked up the chess piece. At first, he noticed nothing strange about it, but after a moment's examination, his pupils contracted, and he looked up in astonishment.
Zhanxing chess formation? General Goo has learned much from his dealings with the Liao Kingdom. It took Sushu Terrace 3 full days to recognize this technique, but General Goo can tell at a glance. You are correct. This is one of the 3 great forbidden techniques, the Zhanxing chess formation.
The Zhanxing chess formation was a bloody magic passed down since ancient times. Its caster could refine black and white chess pieces from their own spiritual energy and use them to control any living thing in the world, be it a beast of the field or a bird of the air, a human, monster, immortal, or demon. As long as they were implanted with a chess piece, they would become puppets that carried out the wielder's bidding. But this sort of forbidden technique had a significant restriction. The spellcaster's cultivation level had to be extremely high. It cost terrific amounts of spiritual energy to refine a single chess piece. Those who weren't at the level of Grandmaster couldn't begin to attempt it. Even so, among the 3 forbidden techniques, the Zhanxing chess formation left the clearest trail. Compared to the rebirth technique with its hundreds of differing tales and the near-mythical space-time gate of life and death, the bloody storm stirred up by the Zhanxing chess formation had repeatedly stained the history of the cultivation world. Countless ambitious tyrants had scrabbled madly through the land to collect scraps of scrolls about this magic. Although no one could yet use it as described in the forbidden texts, single-handedly refining tens of thousands of black and white chess pieces and creating an immense army with a scattering of stones, it was not impossible. No one had succeeded in mastering the Zhanxing chess formation to reshape the world and dye the land red, but cultivators who could make a few dozen or 100 chess pieces did exist, and sometimes, to spark a mutiny or topple a ruling class, it was enough to control the most crucial person for a single moment. Goo Mahng's eyes glimmered.
A white Zhanxing chess piece,
he mumbled, repeating the words with trembling lips.
So Loo John-Sheeng was under control of the white chess piece? Yes.
The word was faint, barely discernible, but it seemed to reignite the glow that had gone out in Goo Mahng.
Does your Imperial Majesty tell me these things so I can redress Zhanxing's injustice?
He cried.
I'll do anything. General Goo.
The Emperor cut him off, pouring another cup of tea.
Calm yourself. Sit. But trust us. We brought you here to tell you the truth in person. We will certainly not let Subject Loo endure injustice for nothing.
His words were ingeniously crafted. What did it mean to not let subject Loo endure injustice for nothing? At first it sounded like he meant to exonerate Loo John-Sheeng, but with a moment's thought, there was another possibility. He would ensure the injustice done to Loo John-Sheeng was for a worthy cause, so that this deputy general's sacrifice would not be in vain. A worthy sacrifice was also not for nothing. But how could Goo Mahng in his current state detect any cunning meaning in the emperor's words? He blinked teary eyes, gazing into the emperor's sincere face. In the end, he lowered his head and sat back down. How easy it was to set alight this bundle of firewood named Goo Mahng. A moment ago, he was icy and cold, as if he would never trust or serve anyone again. All it took was the tiniest spark for him to, once more, offer all he had to the emperor. Morsi closed his eyes, lashes fluttering. The heat of Goo Mangh's reignited hope seared the pain deeper into Morsi's heart. He already knew, in the end, nothing would go as Goo Mahng wished. The bright flare was no more than the final wisp of light Goo Mahng left in Chonghua.
Does General Goo know how we discovered this chess piece?
Goo Mahng shook his head.
After Loo John-Sheeng was taken into custody, the jailer interrogated him. They found his condition extremely strange. He could give no details, and all his reactions were unnaturally delayed. We were suspicious, so we asked ErHa to perform a magical vivisection.
He tapped the white chess piece on the table.
They found this inside him.
The emperor continued.
Zhanxing chess formation isn't a technique easily managed. Since antiquity, no one has truly mastered it. This white chess piece doesn't have the power of those recorded in the texts. In that regard, it's a failure. But it can still control people for a short period of time and make them do the spellcaster's bidding.
Pausing, the emperor looked up.
General Goo, you've always been clever. Surely we needn't tell you who would benefit most from Loo John-Sheeng executing an envoy in those circumstances.
After a beat, Goo Mahng murmured.
Liao. Correct. The Liao Kingdom.
The emperor plucked the white chess piece from the table and set it on its edge. With a flicker of his fingers, the white chess piece was set spinning. He continued, staring at the chess piece.
The spellcaster's cultivation was not high enough to maintain steady control with the Zhanxing chess formation in the long term, nor could he control cultivators with powerful spiritual energy like you or Shizun. But your deputy general, Loo John-Sheeng, was keeping watch over the army alone. He became their best target.
It was as if layers of gauze had been unwrapped to expose the bloody truth beneath. Goo Mangh's fingertips shook as he watched that unassuming white chess piece.
Imagine, General Goo, consider Loo John-Sheeng's temper, his birth, and his status. That he executed the envoy in a rage was only to be expected. If not for ErHa's meticulous examination, this case would be closed and no one would find it suspicious.
The white chess piece spun on the table like a top. Over this madly whirling Zhanxing piece, over this narrow wooden table, an emperor and his subject regarded each other.
A single chess piece brought Chonghua's bravest army to ruin, destroyed Chonghua's growing hopes of reform, and reduced us to a puppet of those old conservative nobles. As for you and others like you will never again have the means to free yourselves. Can you imagine what that looks like? Imagine?
There was a long pause. Dazed, Goo Mangh's voice, hoarse and weary, came out as a whisper.
Your Imperial Majesty, I've been living it.
He pressed his fingers to his brow, burying his face in his hands.
Since the day I knelt in front of the court, begging you to raise those 70,000 gravestones for my brothers, I already...
He was like a traveler who had trudged so long in the desert he had reached the brink of death. The sudden hope had choked him. From his vantage point, Morsi could see Goo Mahng in profile, bright tear tracks at the corners of those slender eyes like swallow-tailed butterflies. The emperor was silent for a spell.
Subject Goo, we apologize.
Faced with an emperor who had once ridiculed and impunged them in court, how many subjects, aside from fawning sycophants, could forgive without resentment? If it were Mu Zhonglian or Morsi who stood here, neither would so easily accept this apology. But Goo Mahng was a general born to poverty. Others could be aloof and heroic and bold, but him? He had too often smilingly pestered noble masters for his soldiers' pay. He had shamelessly attempted to cozy up to the other commanders as he could. It wasn't as though he was really so pathetic as to happily turn the other cheek when others slapped him. It was because he had no choice. He only had so much. He was responsible for the lives and dignity of his 100,000 comrades. His pockets were empty, and he had no powerful backer. All he could pitifully offer up were his smiles. He could nod his head and bend his neck. What other options did he have? Goo Mahng swiped his thumbs across his lashes and looked up. The remaining candles flickered in the wind. Morsi could see his tears hadn't dried, yet he still strove to smile. It was a smile utterly shattered, yet also unsurpassingly strong.
It's nothing,
Goo Mahng said.
Elder Zhou hadn't discovered the Zhenlong chess piece at the time. Your Imperial Majesty didn't know the truth. Your Imperial Majesty's reprimand was justified.
As he spoke, he carefully watched the Emperor's face, eyes bright with tears.
Dare I ask, how does your Imperial Majesty plan to reverse Loo John-Sheeng's sentence?
But the Emperor said nothing. In the silence, the white chess piece slowed and wobbled, weary and dispirited. Outside, lightning flashed again. In its harsh light, the distant mountains looked like demons burst from the bowels of the earth. Thunder shook the skies, and the rain was like a waterfall tumbling down into the mortal world. The Emperor said,
General Goo, we're afraid that won't be possible.
Goo Mahng's eyes were wide in the thunder and lightning. The white chess piece on the table finally exhausted itself. Struggling with the last of its momentum, it wheeled a few more pathetic circles before falling down and lying still. Everything returned to silence. It was as if the river god Feng Yi was churning in the depths, towering waves about to break the water's surface, the gleam of scale-clad justice so close to rising from the abyss. But the wind stilled, and the water calmed. The river god sank back into the deep, cold waters, leaving those on the shore empty-handed and hopeless.
What?
Goo Mahng tasted bitterness in his throat. The Emperor didn't answer directly.
Does General Goo know how Subject Lu fares inside the prison? Even now, he thinks executing the envoy at Phoenix Cry Mountain was a deed he did in a moment of impulse. He regrets it terribly. ErHa said throughout the interrogation he kept asking to see you. He wanted to personally apologize for his recklessness.
Goo Mahng closed his eyes. The hands fallen by his side twisted into fists, and the tendons by his temples protruded, his expression tortured. The Emperor stroked that pale white chess piece, caressing it with a fingertip.
Subject Lu doesn't know that those controlled by the white chess piece will do anything. They might commit any atrocity, whether it was murder, betrayal, or rape. They would believe they wanted to do it. He's no more than an innocent victim, the knife in the killer's hand, but he thinks he is the murderer.
Goo Mahng stood up. He couldn't hold back, his voice shaking.
Then why didn't your Imperial Majesty tell him? Why didn't I tell him?
The Emperor seemed to ask this question to no one, or perhaps he was asking himself. He laughed softly, a little sorrowful.
Because we have a guilty conscience.
He turned to look at the vast curtain of rain. It was a desolate sight, but the voice was bleaker still.
He isn't a rebellious subject. He is only a general who faced torment for Chonghua. Our heart is also made of flesh. We don't have the nerve to see him.
He paused.
Do you think we don't wish to exonerate him? That we aren't willing to clear your reputations and give you justice? You're wrong. What ruler under the heavens would wish to disappoint his important subjects like this?
The Emperor rose and walked to the edge of the golden terrace, which seemed to waver in the wind and rain. Hands behind his back, he gazed into the endless night. He sighed.
General Goo, there's something you wouldn't believe, even if we told you on our knees.
The emperor seemed to hesitate before speaking again.
In our eyes, your army is the most precious treasure we inherited from our imperial father. Regardless of what was offered in exchange, no matter how rich the land, how beautiful the woman, we would not have given you up. We never wanted to lose you all.
Chapter 117. Are you willing to die for the nation? Goo Mahng made no sound. He felt this all extremely absurd. He wasn't alone. Morsi, too, found the emperor's words beyond ridiculous. Precious? Something he never wanted to lose? More like discarded like an old shoe, dissolved with delight. It would be more accurate to say Goo Mahn's army was a thorn in the emperor's side. A treasure? Who would believe it? At Goo Mahn's silence, the emperor turned.
General Goo, what kind of person do you think we are?
Goo Mahn's lips parted, but almost immediately he pressed them tightly together again.
You don't have to say it. We know. All of you people think Imperial Father was a virtuous ruler, willing to give cultivators of slave birth a chance to distinguish themselves. In your eyes, the former emperor made great strides and enacted lasting change. And we?
The emperor smiled.
We're a stickler for tradition, stubborn and inflexible.
He looked at the deluge of water streaming from the eaves.
But have any of you stood in our position and considered our circumstances?
The emperor murmured.
We have no other choice. General Goo, as a slave on the path where you stand today, you've met with every kind of criticism and countless hardships. We've witnessed them all. What we felt most deeply wasn't admiration or pity, but a powerful sympathy. Your path and mine are equally hard to walk. We are both destined to bear the burden of endless curses and condemnation.
Goo Mahng said nothing.
No, in truth, we are less fortunate than you. At least you have a Shizun you can trust wholeheartedly and an army of brave and loyal warriors devoted to you. What do we have? Mang, Zhanxing, or Muzhonglian?
The emperor chuckled, mocking himself.
In this vast imperial city, we have so many relatives, from side branches to direct descendants, but every one of them bears us ill will. Do you know why?
Goo Mahng shook his head.
Because the path we took to the throne ran red with the blood of our brothers.
As he spoke, he turned his face to the inky sky.
Let us share a rumor. No, better to say a forbidden tale. But tongues will wag. We think General Goo may have heard this story before.
When Goo Mahng said nothing, the emperor took a breath and began.
This happened long ago, when we were born. Everyone knows we're the eldest D-son of the imperial family and should have been heir apparent. But there had been a precedent of deposing the D-son in Chonghua. Before one formally ascends the throne, anything can happen. When we were a month old, our mother secretly went to an oracle, who divined a star chart. The array showed great peril, and the oracle predicted we would suffer calamity in our life. It was written in the palaces of our Ziwei star rebirth chart that we were destined for strife among siblings, unlikely to live harmoniously with our brothers. This star chart deeply troubled my mother, and she fell ill for many months. After she regained her health,
the emperor paused and closed his eyes.
From then on, none of the male infants born in the imperial harem lived to see their first year.
Morsi knew the emperor spoke true. As a child, Morsi went often to the palace with his father, but in all those years, he had seen but one imperial scion, now the current emperor. He had clear memories of an imperial concubine auntie, sweet and kind. She liked making pastries and desserts, and every time he visited, she would give him a few boxes of them to take home. That concubine had a frail constitution, and when she later fell pregnant, it took everything she had to give birth to a child. It was a young master. Morsi remembered his parents discussing a suitable congratulatory gift, but before the gift had been settled, the morning bells of the palace tolled throughout the capital. The little boy had passed. Back then, Morsi had been too young, and too many years had gone by since. He didn't remember how the infant had died. Dimly, he thought it was some severe childhood illness. What remained seared in his memory was that, A few days later, while the handmaidens and guards weren't watching, that imperial concubine hung herself in heartbreak and grief. This strange and suspicious incident became the talk of all of Chonghua. After the death of this concubine, the other ladies became afraid. It was whispered that, for these women whose rank depended on their children, a boy wasn't cause for celebration, but a curse. How many mothers' tears had fallen? How many souls had met unjust ends among those countless deaths? In the end, however, it was no more than hearsay. The emperor gazed into the dark, eyes vacant, as if he saw in the rain his brothers of flesh and blood who didn't survive to adulthood.
Whether such a series of misfortunes was truly coincidence or our mother's doing, it is not our place to guess. Regardless of the truth, everyone presumes we walked a blood-stained path to the throne. Who among all the concubines of the late emperor would hope to see us succeed? Of all our families and all our relatives, which would truly take our side? They've never accepted us or treated us with sincerity in the first place. On top of all this, just before the late emperor passed, he considered abolishing our title to adopt Muzhonglian instead. How solid do you think our position is?
Goo Mahng watched him and said nothing. The emperor bit his lip, his eyes flashing.
It's not that we're unwilling to continue along the path the late emperor started on, nor is it that we think you're as insignificant as floating duckweed. It's because,
he closed his eyes,
we had no other choice. We are new to the throne, beset by internal troubles and external strife. Our rule is precarious. To you all, it might seem that a single stamp of the Cinnabar seal resolves matters big and small. In reality, we can't even touch Wang Shujuan's Luomei Pavilion. These are the circumstances Chonghua's new emperor faces. How ridiculous. Luomei Pavilion is no more than a brothel. What stops your Imperial Majesty from closing it?
Goo Mahng asked.
A brothel?
The emperor scoffed, looking up at Goo Mahng.
General Goo, do you have any idea how deeply entrenched this brothel is within the capital? If you look from afar, you might only know it as a venue belonging to Wang Shujuan. But if you attempt to pull it out, you'll discover its root system runs beneath most of the imperial city. Touch it, and the relationships and stakes buried deep in the mud move as one to intimidate you, harangue you, and work against you. Luomei Pavilion has sheltered officials and facilitated cover-ups. It's at the heart of such scandals as fencing stolen goods and bribery. And this is just one brothel. In Chonghua today, 10,000 eyes watch whatever we do. 1,000 mouths say no. 100 arms shove us down onto the throne. If the day comes when we wish to reform the Ministry of Rights, the Bureau of Military Affairs, or even make sweeping changes to Chonghua's political system, how do you imagine that would play out?
The wind buffeted the rain, blowing it into the golden terrace. For a moment, everyone sank into silence. Morsi as he spectated. The emperor, his subject. Eventually, the emperor spoke again.
It is not our wish to retreat, to uphold conservative ideals. We had no choice but to enact these policies, and we have no choice but to shoulder the blame.
No choice but to enact these policies. No choice but to shoulder the blame. These two phrases seemed to stab at Goo Mahng's flesh and heart like nails. His chest heaved with it.
General Goo.
Goo Mahng raised his eyes. The emperor laid slender fingers on the crimson lacquer of the railing.
Do you know what it is we've most wanted to do all our life? We've wanted to shut up those shameless, toadying old nobles. We've wanted to make those useless sacks of shit spit out the meat in their mouths. Chuntang was worse to trust Huapuan. Thus, the Liao kingdom came to be, and slave-born cultivators became anathema to the people of Chonghua. But Imperial Father was right to trust in subject Gu, and thus Chonghua gained an invincible general to oppose the Liao kingdom. First there was Huapuan, but now there is you, Goo Mahng, and him, Loo John-Sheeng. The path the late emperor chose was correct, but we want to walk farther than he did.
As he paused, his distant gaze gained focus, his fingers slowly and subconsciously clenching into a fist as if he were about to face a thing he found abhorrent.
Those talentless officials who cling to the fringes of our court, Those stick-in-the-mud old nobles, they've never cared for the nation of Chonghua. They think of nothing but what rewards they'll receive today and what titles they'll receive tomorrow. If they were to step onto the battlefield, they'd be useless, a crowd of armchair strategists. All these years, they've brandished the excuse of Huapo'an's treason to relentlessly oppose letting capable officials or knowledgeable soldiers take initiative. The moment a slave-born cultivator stands out, they rush to surround them and fling a pile of baseless charges at them, dooming them to the death of Fengbo Pavilion.
Footnote number 9. Fengbo Pavilion is the name of the highest court during the Southern Song Dynasty, where the loyal general Yue Fei was put to death on baseless charges of treason. At these words, it was not just Goo Mahng, but even Morsi who was shocked. When had the emperor ever said so much in one breath, so fervently and openly, his eyes flashing with intense light? It seemed to pierce the thick shell he wore in front of outsiders. At this moment, he looked like any zealous and passionate youth.
They're afraid of Chonghua changing. They're afraid of understanding black magic techniques. They're afraid of all the possible upheaval the future brings. They want to grow old and live easy, striving for momentary gratification. They care nothing about how, in 100 years, the country may fall, their families may perish. These are the nobles of Chonghua, my brothers,
said the emperor.
But you're different, he continued. My brothers, my noble peers, those whose veins flow with the same blood as mine, they merely think how to suck another mouthful of blood from Chonghua, how to guard their glorious place at the top. But General Goo, you're different. Your brothers, your army, they're a sharp sword, the likes of which Chonghua hasn't forged in hundreds of years. Even if you don't believe it, we meant what we said. This is our treasure.
The moth, trapped by the rain and unable to escape, danced madly before the candle, finally throwing itself into the fire. With a sound like a sigh, flame licked up, emitting the acrid scent of char. The moth died for the light at last, falling into the pool of wax.
We wish to do more in this life than follow in Father's footsteps. We want to curtail the power of the nobles, demote the fringe officials, and blaze a new trail. Go where no one's dared before. Chonghua blindly rejects forbidden black magic techniques, but we must know them. We must master them. We needn't use them, but what's wrong with understanding them? We ask you, if Chonghua had studied more of the 5 great forbidden techniques, would Loo John-Sheeng have met such an end?
I feel like I know where this is going. Goo Mahng flinched.
General Goo, one subject Loo is enough. We don't want to see a second or third harmed by black magic while we languish in ignorance.
He looked to the heavens. Another bolt of lightning forked across the sky, and a boom of thunder rumbled in its wake. The emperor's eyes blazed.
It's high time Chonghua had a storm like this.
The leaden clouds roiled overhead. On this dark night, most of the candles in the depths of the palace had already gone out. Only the golden terrace, perched at the highest peak of the imperial city, still glowed faintly amid the howling winds. It was like an icy sword pointed straight up into the 9 heavens, piercing the thick clouds.
General Goo, we need someone loyal enough, brave enough, and clever enough. We need this person to infiltrate the Liao kingdom,
yes,
and send information back to us, to become the poison in the bellies of both Liao and those old nobles.
Goo Mahng wasn't stupid. By now, he'd guessed why the emperor invited him to Golden Terrace already. As he anticipated, what the emperor said next was,
Subject Goo, are you willing to endure a difficult mission as Chonghua's right hand?
For a moment, Goo Mahng was quiet.
Your Imperial Majesty wants me to pretend to defect?
In the silence that followed, the sound of rain pouring over the roof tiles seemed to drill into their ears. Goo Mahng was waiting for this answer, and so was Morsi. The atmosphere was taut as the string of the jade bow pulled to full draw, waiting for the last ounce of force. The emperor closed his eyes.
Yes.
The bowstring snapped with a terrible sound, and the bow left behind couldn't stop shaking, couldn't stop trembling. Even as a passive spectator within the Jade Scroll, Morsi felt the tragic misery of this night slashing deep into his flesh. Blood surged to his head, where it congealed into dark ice. This single word from the Emperor seemed to have frozen him solid. He couldn't feel his limbs. It was cold, so cold. Or perhaps it was because he had already been waiting for this line of exoneration, this explanation of the truth behind the treason. He had waited for 8 years, grieved for 8 years, suffered for 8 years, and despaired for 8 years. When he finally heard this, that Goo Mahng really did have a secret, that he was in fact a chess piece Chonghua had pushed into the Liao kingdom, every emotion he had felt for the past 8 years transformed instantly into grief and heartache.
Dying with jeweled sword in hand to repay the trust of the king's command.
How ironic. Only those who truly ascended to this platform that thousands of people held in envy would understand what a trusted subject was. You would be thrust into an eternal darkness. Every plot or scheme, sacrifice or machination flew from the ruler's mouth to your ear. From then on, a brilliant and sincere smile was bloodily torn from your face, while a mask you had no choice over was locked in place. Once the bloodstains dried, the scars faded, and you raised your head, you'd never recognize your own face in the bronze mirror again. This so-called hero nodded as the storm raged below, perhaps for the sake of a dream or a goal, or for a person, a promise, or an ideal. From that point on, he offered up his life, forsaking every avenue of retreat. As the wind blew through his wide sleeves, Goo Mahng tucked back the loose hair at his temples.
Your Imperial Majesty wants to prove you're right. You want to take on an earth-shaking cause. To give those old nobles who don't believe in you reason to reconsider whether you're trash that stepped over the bloody flesh of your brothers to ascend the throne, or a monarch who can hold up the vault of the heavens. Is that not so?
Goo Mahng's tone was too measured, as if he was striving to repress some emotion. The Emperor waited for him to finish.
Your Imperial Majesty wishes to be a wise ruler, to reform the foundations of Chonghua. This is a good thing to be sure, and I admire it very much.
The Emperor let out a soft breath of relief, yet just as he parted his lips to speak, he heard Goo Mahng continue.
But Imperial Majesty, I've already died 70,000 times. The wounds over my heart have yet to scab, and there are 70,000 heroic souls who have yet to receive burials. Yes, I'm willing to become your sharp blade, the poison fed to the Liao kingdom, the spy that gathers their secrets of black magic, the sacrifice you offer to placate the old nobles. I can agree to all these things. I'm willing to do all these things, as long as you, on behalf of my 70,000 dead, let my brother live. I'm not some god of war. I'm merely one among those 100,000 slave cultivators. I will become your traitor and endure a lifetime of infamy, but I ask that you give them the justice they deserve.
The Emperor slowly closed his eyes, as if Goo Mahng's words pushed him into pained unease.
We won't let you suffer for nothing,
he said.
There will come a day, Subject Goo, there will come a day when we clear your name. On that day, we will personally bestow a blue and golden ribbon of heroes upon you. We will announce to the great breath of Chonghua, announce to each and every safe and happy citizen, that they are only blessed with such a world because of your sacrifice.
Goo Mahng's eyes flashed, but he remained unmoved by the future the Emperor painted. He was clear-headed yet, unwaveringly sinking his teeth into the boon as he asked, unwilling to let go. He faced the Emperor squarely, tone solemn.
Then what about Loo John-Sheeng?
The Emperor looked at him, their gazes locked in some intangible battle. In the end, in this dead and unnerving silence, the Emperor was first to concede. He closed his eyes.
Subject Goo, there is no way Subject Loo can live.
Chapter 118. I am also a living person. Goo Mahng had predicted the Emperor's response, but when these words crashed down like thunder, his voice shook.
Why? Because this chess piece was tempered with demonic chi. Loo John-Sheeng's spiritual flow is no longer pure. How many in all of Chonghua would let a man who bears traces of black magic on his body live in peace? Since antiquity, those stained with demonic qi are either drawn and quartered or tormented to death upon the experimentation table. Do you prefer to clear his name only for him to die under torture, or is it better for his death to at least pave the way for Chonghua, for all of you?
Goo Mahng couldn't summon a reply.
We want Chonghua to accept slaves and to understand black magic.
After a pause, the emperor continued.
But the price is that the injustice Loo John-Sheeng has suffered will only ever be known to the two of us. He must be sentenced.
In the squalling wind, another handful of lanterns went dark. The light on the golden terrace dimmed further. Goo Mahng raised his head slightly, blinking away the wetness in his eyes. It seemed he didn't want to keep arguing with the emperor. After a beat, he asked, his voice low and hoarse.
Then, what next? What next, after the sentencing? Next, we will lay down a logical path for your treason. After the autumn hunt this year, Loo John-Sheeng will be executed and the remnants of your army will be detained. We will betray not the slightest hint of gentleness or compassion towards slave cultivators. We will be meticulous. The entire court will believe we have chosen to cleave to the mores of the old nobles. Everyone will watch as we abrogate your authority, demote you, and replace you. We will set your feet on the road of despair. After the execution, following the autumn hunt is complete, we will give you the last push and provide you sufficient reason to defect. To the Liao Kingdom?
Goo Mahng asked.
To the Liao Kingdom.
Goo Mahng guffawed as if he heard some absurd joke.
How far does your Imperial Majesty plan to go for those to believe that I, Goo Mahng, would choose the darkest, most depraved nation in all the 9 provinces and 28 nations, defecting to the Liao Kingdom?
The last traces of his smile twisted on his face, his hatred seeming to imbue his expression with a beastly malevolence.
How far would I have to be pushed to defect to the nation that has slaughtered countless of my comrades and stirred the flames of war across the 9 nations? You see why Loo John-Sheeng must die,
replied the emperor.
If Loo John-Sheeng lives, no one will believe the once earth-shatteringly powerful General Goo, so devoted to his nation and its rulers, would pass willingly through the gates of the Liao Kingdom. Only if Loo John-Sheeng dies does that seed of hatred sprout in your heart. Only then do these events have a turning point, rational and believable.
He paused, then repeated.
Subject Goo, think about it. If Loo John-Sheeng is saved, what would be lost? Everyone would see he's been wronged. His name would be exonerated. But if he's infected with the black magic demonic qi, he's doomed to execution regardless. Perhaps you believe that if he dies this way, at least those 70,000 graves, those 30,000 heroes of your army, will be fairly treated. But we tell you now, they will not.
The emperor's black eyes swirled with thick clouds and heavy mist. That darkness was a wall no one could break through anymore.
If Loo John-Sheeng doesn't die, we could try to redress the injustice done to your army and give your soldiers rewards or gravestones. But the old nobles would most certainly jump out with all sorts of bizarre excuses to stop us. Most terrifying of all, they might say Deputy General Loo was infected with demonic qi. No one can say for sure whether other soldiers in the camp were infected. So, it'd be safer to show no mercy. They might demand we execute every single one of those 30,000 comrades you have left. Subject Goo, right now, your army is like an old manor that has caught fire. We will do our best to retrieve whatever can be rescued. But the first spark fell on Loo John-Sheeng. He has been reduced to ash. We cannot save him. We are so sorry.
Goo Mahng was silent for a long interval. Almost indifferently, he said,
Okay, I understand. We are treasures, but a single spark can reduce your Imperial Majesty's treasure to ash.
He looked up.
Your Imperial Majesty, do you know what my army is to me?
This was an insubordinate question, but the emperor didn't rebuke him. His lashes trembled, and his expression was evasive, even sorrowful. Goo Mahng continued.
They are my blood, my eyes, my arms, and my legs, my family, and my life. However precious a treasure may be, it's useless once destroyed. Merely dust after the flames blaze through. But family and kin are different. Even if they die, even if they're burned, even if they're nothing but ash, they will have a tombstone in my heart. I will remember every one of their names, every one of their faces, until the day I join them in death. We didn't mean...
The emperor started.
Then what did you mean?
Goo Mahng showed him a gentle, hollow smile.
Your Imperial Majesty, you say we are your treasures, but treasures are not alive. We are living people. For you, we've shed blood. For Chonghua, we've shed tears. We've worked, we've given, we've tried, even died. I'm not sure if you've noticed.
His questions came one after another, as if those 70,000 dead had become vengeful ghosts, overtaking his body, the mass of them possessing his solitary figure. They demanded restitution from their emperor.
General Goo.
The emperor's eyes dulled, but he raised them to gaze back into Goo Mahn's.
We have noticed, but to sacrifice the lives of 30,000 men and the glory of another 70,000, to give up the future of all slave cultivators in Chonghua, to cleanse the reputation of one man, is it worth it?
Goo Mahn's shoulders shook. His lips trembled. He wanted to refute the emperor's words, but he couldn't speak. He was a preternaturally talented commander. Of course he understood what the emperor said was true. His ruler's words were heartless, but they were also correct. This was the path involving the least sacrifice. Yet he could only simply nod. How could he accept it?
That day in the throne room, when you knelt at our feet begging for gravestones for your dead men, to show mercy to your remaining soldiers, we said you were delusional. But now as we stand before you, we swear you this oath. We will not let Deputy General Loo's sacrifice be in vain. We will give you everything you asked that day. But for Loo John-Sheeng's life, the rest is yours. Those 70,000 gravestones and the safety of your 30,000 remaining soldiers. We promise that one day we will show you a future where heroes can become heroes no matter the circumstances of their birth, and every life will be treated equally.
Goo Mahng took a step back, shaking his head. The emperor's promise was too heavy, weighing him down until he almost seemed stopped. Only after a long while did he hoarsely mutter,
Lies. We never lie.
Goo Mahng was on the edge of insanity. He looked up, his gaze like a sharp sword unsheathing, eyes scarlet as he hurled a reckless shout at the emperor.
Liar!
His voice was thunderous with rage. In the roiling storm and whipping wind, the blinded and clawed beast of the altar had been spun around and round by the carrot and the stick until he didn't know what he should believe. He railed at the master who tamed him, slamming over and over against the bars of his cage. Morsi closed his eyes. The pain of a body that had endured the Jade Scroll repair could not be more than a cowering, bleeding, loyal heart.
Beast of the altar. Beast of the altar.
In the past, people had spoken this epithet as they spread stories of General Goo's glory. But now, Morsi could only see a bloody beast, in truth, filleted of its skin, trapped and howling in the cage. The emperor's beast, Chonghua's beast. It hurt so keenly for its comrades that it longed for death. Yet those who had raised it now tore off its hide, wrapping a new layer of skin over that mutilated body. They wanted to send it to another country, instructing it to endure the pain and burn up the last wisps of warmth and light it possessed. The rain poured down around them. The emperor stood ramrod straight, supported by some power inherent to monarchs that allowed him neither to cower nor to shrink back in the face of Goo Mahng's intense emotion. His expression was unsightly, but still he persisted. After a long silence, the emperor finally answered with a quiet question of his own.
Do you think we made this decision lightly? Do you think framing loyal subjects is something that brings us ease? Do you think tormenting our greatest general and chasing him off to another nation is something that brings us ease? Do you think that, as we stand here today, surrounded by thunder beneath the 9 heavens upon the golden terrace, telling you these things, we can be at ease?
The emperor's voice became louder and louder. His fingertips were trembling, his eyes flashing with an unsteady light.
Subject Goo, you once said 70,000 people died at the Battle of Phoenix Cry Mountain. So you see 70,000 wronged ghosts demanding justice from you day and night, reproaching you, cursing you, spurning you, asking you why.
His voice shook mightily, each word ground out between his teeth, each phrase stained with blood.
Do you think it is different for us?
Goo Mahng looked up with ridicule in his eyes.
What does your Imperial Majesty see? 70,000 broken treasures? Or is it a mountain of destroyed clay servants, all identical?
He'd gone mad. He must have gone mad. After having his arms torn off and his heart cut out, Goo Mahng was no longer afraid to say anything to the Emperor's face. Irreverent words burst from his lips.
Your Imperial Majesty says over and over that you think of us as people. Over and over again, you say you can see my dead brothers, your dead subjects. But you grieve that your invincible army lost 70,000 soldiers. You grieve a number, a ledger full of heroes. You don't grieve for each and every human life.
Outside the Golden Terrace was an endless storm. Inside the Golden Terrace was boundless silence. At length, the Emperor squeezed his eyes shut, then opened them once more. His lips moved as if to speak. Then he pursed them again. Finally, in a choked voice, he softly, sorrowfully spoke a name.
Shu Xiaomao.
Just one name. Goo Mahng froze. His fingers, originally shaking from rage, seemed to be locked in by black ice. He stood motionless, staring at the Emperor in disbelief, as though he thought it might be a figment of his imagination. He was certainly mistaken to have heard this sort of pathetic, ridiculous name, the name of his brother, his comrade, from the mouth of the Son of Heaven. But such names issued one after another from the lips of the Emperor, clearly, sorrowfully, solemnly.
Yan Yufei, Qin Cheng, Sun He, Luo Quan.
He recited them one by one. With each name, a brother's voice and features rose before Goo Mangh's eyes. A man who liked to drink fiery, cheap Shao-Dao-Tzu wine. A cousin who had a mole on the bridge of his nose. A little scamp who always lost his money gambling but never learned any better. And that little devil who recklessly squeezed himself into the squadron at the age of 16, his face so terribly young. The invocation of these names seemed to summon their souls. Goo Mahng bowed his head, his back bending. He buried his face in his palms, fingers digging into his hair, and cried brokenly.
Stop talking. Qin Fei, Zhao Sheng, Wei Ping.
Qin Fei's bright laughter seemed to echo back into the world of the living and ring in his ears. Zhao Sheng had once run over to his commander's tent in one of the garrisons to bring him a pot of sweet wine from the village nearby. When he had clasped it to his chest, it was still warm. Wei Ping was 30 years old already, but he looked so young. When he smiled, his canines would show sweetly, and he had grinned and laughed arrogantly when he requested to stay behind at Phoenix Cry Mountain. That had become Goo Mangh's last farewell with the rascal. Who would remember these men's names? Who would remember?
General Goo. General Goo.
In life, a hero among men. In death, a hero among ghosts.
No. All of this is meaningless. I only wanted every one of you to return safely after each battle. No one would want their brothers to receive posthumous glory after a horsehide burial. Stop reciting them.
Goo Mahng clutched his head in pain, crumbling to his knees. He howled, on the verge of collapsing, crying out like a trapped beast.
Don't say anymore! Don't say anymore! I remember them too.
The Emperor walked over to Goo Mahng, gazing down at the man who had buried himself in the dust in front of him, curled in on himself in the muddy sand, and murmured,
Goo Mahng, I remember them all too.
He spoke frankly, setting aside the royal we.
I'm sorry. Unlike you, I never spent my days with them from dawn until dusk. I can't remember their ages, appearances, interests, any of those details. But since I've received the list of soldiers who perished at Phoenix Cry Mountain, I've been committing their names to memory.
Goo Mahng's icy forehead pressed pathetically against the floor. His tears fell in fat drops down to his cheeks as he sobbed, howling in grief. He had finally fallen apart. He had silently endured the wounds that covered his body, had painstakingly subdued his own agony and licked away the blood, just barely enough to put on a brave face before others. But the Emperor tore open the wounds that had begun to scab over, and scarlet blood and flesh spilled outward in a great rush. It hurt so much. It hurt so much. It hurt so much he was going to die.
I thought,
the Emperor said,
that even if I can't openly give them the gravestones of heroes, I can still honor them in my heart. General Goo, every day and every night, I engrave them into memory. We're sorry. We are powerless to change many things.
He gripped Goo Mahn's arms, helping him to stand, letting Goo Mahng slowly lift his head. The rims of the Emperor's eyes were wet.
But we ask you to believe us. We never have, never will, see you as cheap pawns, as lowly slave-born bodies.
It was an unremarkable sentence, containing neither praise nor commendation. Yet Goo Mahng sobbed uncontrollably. He knelt and staggered forward, struggling free of the Emperor's hands. He pulled himself to the edge of the golden terrace. He looked up at those towering mountains and vast sky. The sounds of his weeping seemed to be carved out of his throat, dripping with crimson blood. The torrential storm swallowed his sobs. The nation was an expanse of grieving rain. Goo Mahng was completely drained. He pressed his head to the railing as his shoulders shook. The ends of his eyes and the tip of his nose were flushed red. He had nothing left to say. Eventually, the Emperor slowly crossed the terrace to stand next to him.
Subject Goo, do you believe us now? We meant every word. We would not lie to you. We swear this oath.
He pressed 2 fingers to his temple, taking Chonghwa's customary position for vows. Under the lightning that acred across the 9 heavens, there upon the golden terrace, Chonghwa's new ruler made Chonghwa's subject a most solemn promise.
If General Goo accepts our request, we swear to 3 things. First, General Goo's 30,000 soldiers will receive proper protections. Second, the law allowing slaves to cultivate in Chonghua will never be repealed. Third, we will inter those 70,000 souls lost at Phoenix Cry Mountain with all the customary national rites upon Warrior Soul Mountain, complete with inscribed gravestones. Should we renege on any of these promises, may we live without the love of our descendants and die without a place of burial. Chonghwa's fortunes will turn to ash in our hands, and we shall be condemned for all eternity.
After a pause, those final words fell from his mouth.
In life and after death, we shall never know peace.
Oh my God. I don't even know where to begin with my notes. I feel like I've been saying this after every freaking reading, but what else am I supposed to say when stuff just be like, ooh! Oh my gosh. Y'all. I guess I'm gonna just have to thoroughly look through my notes because I realized in my last video, I did not go through every single last one of my notes. So that just is what it is. But oh my gosh. So starting with chapter 15, we have, Mo Xi is able to now go within the Jade Scrolls, and the scene before him, they're at this golden terrace, which is supposed to be the most difficult place to reach in the palace. And typically speaking, where I guess the most trusted person would go. And we have the Emperor here talking to Goo Mahng, saying that he wants to exonerate Loo John-Sheeng from being falsely accused and the victim of someone else's plot by having been used by a Zhanxing chess piece, which is interesting because some time ago, I don't remember which chapters or what volume, but a chess piece was mentioned, and I was like, I wonder if this is the Zhanxing chess formation, if it's a nod to that, if that's going to come up, but I didn't say anything about it. Well, and here it is. So yes, that is exactly what happened, and to find that out, it's nice to know now. But now I'm wondering when when Loo John-Sheeng, I can't talk. When Loo John-Sheeng and Morsi spoke with each other, if Morsi spoke with him by the time it was removed or if it was still inside of him, that I do not know. Anyway, we know that Loo John-Sheeng was he was wronged, okay? And the emperor apologized for this. That kind of threw me by surprise. I'm not even going to lie. I was like, did the emperor just apologize? But okay. So then the other thing I wanted to say, actually, it's really like the only other thing I wanted to say about this chapter because, we just get the history and knowing what truly happened. I wanted to point out something that has been said multiple times throughout this series, and we'll analyze it maybe like in our live together. But there have been many moments mentioned of a moth to a flame. And this happened in this chapter as well, where it was talking about the moth going to a flame, awaiting its death, essentially. But this has been very recurring. And so I want to talk about that in our live session. Anyway, then we also are heading toward chapter 116, where I guess this forbidden technique, it's something that clearly this lets us know that Remnants of Filth was written before ErHa, or not necessarily written before ErHa, but the time period of the story is before ErHa. And I won't go into details on why, but if you know, then you know. So it's nice to just know with these two stories that Remnants of Filth has come first. And so the question now is, who is this grandmaster from the Liao kingdom that used the Zhenlong chess piece on Loo John-Sheeng? Obviously, they weren't strong enough because they couldn't use it on someone like Morsi or General Goo. But who is this person? And how did they, sneak to get to Loo John-Sheeng? Nevertheless, this whole thing is crazy. Like, as I was reading, I was like, I suspect that the emperor is not really going to exonerate Loo John-Sheeng. And I was like, yeah, he specifically said to Goo Mahng, we will certainly not let subject Loo endure injustice for nothing. And to me, that didn't sound like we will exonerate him. That sounded like we're going to keep this injustice, but we're going to give it purpose. And then, of course, Morsi said it. So I was like, haha, there we go. Alrighty. So then I got extremely pissed off at what the emperor said. On page 196, he basically implied that he didn't imply, he said, given Loo John-Sheeng's temper, his birth, and his status, that he would naturally become enraged enough to execute the envoy. To me, that is the equivalent of saying, well, of course, it's only natural that Black people are more violent. Of course, we're not surprised that if there's Black on Black crime or that a Black person did this or they did that because of, their temper. They're always angry, especially women, because of their status and their birth. That was kind of the equivalent for me. And I'm not like heavy on, all of that stuff. But just thinking about it, that's kind of like, it was akin to that for me. And I got so upset. And I was like, great. So you're saying just because, number one, we have Loo John-Sheeng's temper, but just because of his birth and his status, you're automatically saying that it's only natural and it makes sense that he would behave in this way? No, sir. But I'm going to believe that he was saying that that is just the way that everyone else would think, that naturally it makes sense that he did this. And so all of this falls into place very well. Let me look at it again. Imagine, General Goo, consider Loo John-Sheeng's temper, his birth, and his status. He executed the envoy, and his rage only to be is only to be expected. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, yeah. I'm just going to assume that maybe he's saying that's what other people believe, just off of everything else he said in these chapters. But I don't know. But that really made me, extremely pissed. I'm just going to say that. And I just was having a lot of feelings during this whole conversation because, him talking about he felt guilty and that's why he didn't go talk to Loo John-Sheeng and let him know the truth. It was just kind of like, I don't know if I believe you or not. But nevertheless, we continue to go on. So as far as the emperor and his thoughts and on his own actions, he has a heavy burden of being an emperor. And part of being an emperor is having to face the thoughts of the nobles, the others. And, this is definitely something I've seen before in C-dramas, but also, we hear about this in regular life, just period. Like, especially in America, a lot of people say, the president isn't the one that's actually running the country. It's all the people behind them. And the presidents need to listen to those people. Otherwise, things could go wrong for them. And so I definitely understand Loo John-Sheeng. I mean, why do I keep saying that? The emperor from that perspective. But for just a split second, I was angry. Now, look now, y'all. I'm a very understanding person, but that doesn't mean I'm infallible. So as soon as the emperor dared to compare himself with Goo Mahng and was basically like, you and I are one and the same, but maybe I'm a little bit worse. I was like, the audacity. Actually, I put in my notes, the all freaking audacity, because I'm sorry, who are you comparing yourself to? Ruler of a nation? But I calmed down because, yes, people can be experiencing different things, but no matter if it's a high class or a low class, they can still be feeling the same emotions or under the same circumstances, but on different levels. So I was like, let me calm down. I understand what he's saying. I definitely get it, especially after he gave his whole sob story, blah, blah, snore. It makes sense. And, people, regular, common people like myself, like us, it's harder for us to understand the struggles that higher class people or richer people go through because we see what we lack, they have. And so I try not to ever envy anyone who may be higher than me, who has more money and blah, 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 all that stuff, who owns a company, because you don't know what woes they are facing. And at the end of the day, I'm not one to say like, oh, a poor person's woes is greater than a person who's rich, or a person who is low class has more sorrows than a person who's a multimillionaire or something like that, who owns several companies. So I get it. And I'm not mad at the emperor for speaking because he has every right to feel, what he feels. But, oh my gosh, y'all. When it comes to the nation and the whole chapter of Are You Willing to Die for the Nation? I knew almost instantly where that was going. I was like, oh my God. Oh my God. So, yeah, we basically see it here. The emperor really just like, he wants Goo Mahng to go and pretend to be a traitor. So now we finally have the truth. And that's so nice to know because even I think about Morsi when he was like, hey, Goo Mahng wouldn't defect. He just wouldn't. Well, you're right. He actually wouldn't. So it was nice to know that. And, it just takes me back to like the previous chapters. A note that I had forgotten to say was, Morsi was like, I really want to go and look. I have to, because he's holding on to that guilt. And it's like, if he could just get a glimpse into the past with the Jade Scrolls, it might absolve that personal guilt and cowardliness that he was feeling. So I'm sure, even though in the moment while he's in the scrolls, it hurts, that there's a huge load lifted off him, that he knew, he knows he did not believe in the wrong person. He didn't bet on the wrong person. He bet on the right person, so much so that the emperor himself clearly trusts him so freaking much with something so serious. And as much as it sucks, I totally understand where the emperor is coming from as far as setting up this plan and the goals that he has for his people. And he's thinking long term, while all of the nobles are thinking short term. In fact, they aren't even thinking short term. I don't know. They're thinking like for themselves. It's still short term. They want instant gratification. They want to see how they can rise, but they're not necessarily thinking about their future family. They're not thinking about the common people or the nation at all. And what the emperor is trying to do is get Chonghua to a place where they can truly rise. And if they aren't learning about dark magic, if they aren't doing the things they need to do to keep their kingdom afloat, then there's a possibility that, yes, eventually it could fall. So I totally understand the emperor from that perspective. And it's nice, but also sad to see that Goo Mahng is the one that he trusts with this. And it's also sad to see, you know, that Loo John-Sheeng won't be able to be redeemed or exonerated. Really, really sucky. And so, man, I was skeptical of the emperor at first, but as he kept talking, I was like, okay, I think the emperor is sincere, especially when we get to chapter, 118, where Goo Mahng is like, you just see us as treasures, but we're living things. We're living beings, not things. And the emperor is like, hold on. You think that I don't feel this pain too? Which is very understandable. It's like, hey, for me to have to make this decision, do you know how difficult that is for me? Yes, you were by their side. You know their names and what they did, what they like, what they don't like, who they're with and stuff like that. I don't know all these details. The only thing I can know about them is their names. But do you think it's easy for me to lose 70,000 people? Like, do you think it's easy for me to put more people at risk by having you defect, use your general prowess, and kill a bunch more people, definitely. Like, this isn't easy for me. This decision is not something I made lightly, and honestly, I believe that because that is a heavy decision to make, especially sending your best general over to the traitor nation. That is not a light decision, So it's nice to see that the emperor actually does care for the people, and basically he's just been putting on a facade. Do I like it? Absolutely not, but I understand his reasoning behind it. I'm not going to say it's right or wrong, but I understand it. And man, my gosh. It's just, I want to talk about there are some things I'm like, should I talk about now or should I wait till the live? And I'm just like looking over my notes, trying to skip through things. There's so much that happened, but one thing I can say is the emperor definitely showed his sincerity by speaking out the people's names, by being honest with Goo Mahng about how he felt, by swearing that oath, by telling him the promises, by even helping Goo Mahng off the ground from when he was crying, by dropping the we and saying like, look, being more personable. And then he apologized 3 times at first. And I was like, hey, they say that good things come in threes, but then he still apologized 2 more times. So a total of 5 freaking times this man apologized to Goo Mahng. And to apologize even once is already enough in itself, because what emperor is apologizing to its people? None. Okay, just none of them are. So that was pretty surprising. And I was just like, whoa. So that is definitely something that garners more respect in my mind's eye for the emperor. So I'm not going to say much else because everything else we can talk about it during the live session when we review book 4, which I'm still trying to figure out the scheduling of that. You guys will know soon. Man. I don't know what else to say, so I'm going to just go. I hope you all have a wonderful day or a beautiful night's rest, and 我爱你们.